Hi, everyone. Welcome to What Just Happened. Today, we welcome Sucharita Kodali, VP and Principal Analyst, Forrester Research. Welcome, Sucharita. Lovely to have you.
Thanks for having me, Christine. I'm thrilled to be here.
Let's hear a little bit where you are now and how you have this seat looking out over the landscape of what's happening in the industry.
Thank you. I am an analyst at Forrester, which is a technology research company. And I've been working with companies in the retail sector and retail adjacent, so suppliers to retail that could be technology, brand manufacturers that often are now retailers, and basically working with them on their digital transformation, which is a never-ending endeavor because, even it started with e-commerce and then went to everything from marketplaces to store transformation to whatever is the latest silver bullet coming from the investment community. It's a grab bag of a lot of different initiatives and priorities for these companies.
In your position as an analyst and as you're working with retailers, how are you balancing advisement when it comes to caution and shiny object syndrome?
Just be very cautious and recognize that there are a lot of things that could go wrong or go sideways. And something that may seem hot today may end up being anything from the next Clubhouse to the next NFT. And we forget a lot of the failures, and we think that every new development is the next new thing. Even with e-commerce started in the early 90s, and it didn't become something that you absolutely had to invest in until the early 2000s. So, and some would say even the mid 2000s. So you can give it time. There's a reason that Amazon and kind of Amazon is and it's a whole bucket and beast in and of itself. And the irony of what I'm saying is be like Amazon, but then don't be like Amazon, because Amazon is a technology company that for a whole slew of reasons is able to do things that they are able to do that nobody else in the entire world is able to do. So that's why I think it's really important to not invest like Amazon. But I do think that culturally, Amazon has an approach that I think is a really smart one, which is this idea of the two-way versus one-way door. And you never want to bet your farm on something that's a one-way door unless you know that it's absolutely the right direction, which often means testing and gradually making your way into something. Their big bets often are the two-way doors, which is test it out and see if something is going to work and make sure that it's something that you can extricate yourself from painlessly. And I think that is the approach that companies should see, is unless something is going to be a two-way door, especially for these shiny objects that you don't know what the future holds, there's definitely no reason to invest. And in fact, even with a lot of AI solutions, Gen AI, I think that we saw a lot of two-way doors. And you look at a lot of the announcements that were made, it's like people were testing out chatbots, or they were testing things out internally, or they were playing around with Gen AI to create product descriptions or whatever. And I think that's a perfectly valid approach. That's a great two-way door approach. A one-way door would be, I don't know, that you fire your entire call center and let Gen AI take over.
There are beloved American retailers and brands that have fallen out of favor, and then they come back. I'd like to lay out for you a Target versus Gap conversation. One's a retailer, one's a brand, but they were both very hot. Gap fell off, Gap's coming back. What can we learn there? How does it apply to a retailer like a Target, which actually for years and years was in the consumer zeitgeist, a brand, even though it's a retailer? Target was its own brand. I'd love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's a great question. And what I would say is that retail is cyclical. And if you have great brand equity, that's a great asset to have. Even if it may be a little bit tarnished, you can leverage everything from nostalgia to being able to introduce it to people who never knew enough to form an opinion about it. It's everything from the renaissance of Gucci. Gucci's actually in the same boat right now, right? Because they had like their Tom Ford days, and then it's been up and down too. There are all kinds of things with cultural equity that can be brought back with the right leadership team, and sometimes it can be brought back and you can put a shiny new veneer on it and it excites people again. I think that in Target's case, like there is a lot of competition. There's not a lot of competition. The truth is there are not that many mass merchants at their level, right? And they're a $100 billion retailer now. There are not even that many $100 billion retailers in the world, in the United States, and definitely not in the United States. And so, and they've got this deep store footprint. So I think that they have been stumbling recently, but I don't think that is the story that needs to be written about Target 5 years from now. It can be a very different retailer, but they need to go do their own design thinking and figure out where their opportunities for improvement are, looking both at their data and their execution. There's a lot of fingers pointed at things like their DEI initiatives as an example. If they would just ask their customers, there are about a half a dozen things, or a dozen things even, that I could share that are just unpleasant about the Target experience. And a lot of them are really basic things like inventory not being where it needs to be, or the product that you're looking for not being even available at the store. So, and that could just be, maybe it's just my store, maybe it's like the unique products I'm looking at, but those to me are more fundamental problems than any systemic reason that people wouldn't want to shop at Target. And then they also have other factors in particular now, like their macro concerns, and their biggest competitors are actually outspending them, I think, from a CapEx standpoint. Like Walmart has actually been doing very well, and they've taken advantage of that to extend their lead even further. And if you have to invest in store renovations, and it's hard to do it from a position of weakness, which Target is in now, but they're going to have to. Anyway, it's a very long-winded way to say, I think that they can make a comeback. I would be shocked if they don't. And if they don't start showing signs of it, I also wouldn't be surprised if there are some changes at the leadership to force that to happen. As far as Gap is concerned, apparel has really been struggling ever since the pandemic. And it's not clear what the future of the apparel sector even will be, because there is, I think, a big clash of just philosophical, the future of the world that clashes with the apparel industry, which the apparel industry has really grown in the last, say, 30 years due to overseas manufacturing and fast fashion and this idea of ready-to-wear disposable clothing. And that is completely at odds with the future of the planet. And so it raises a lot of questions as to what are the brands and apparel that will even survive in the future, and what will their businesses look like? And if you're placing bets on making more cheap clothes for consumers, I would posit the hypothesis that maybe that's not the right way to go. Maybe you need to think about completely pivoting to other ways of making money.
The big fallout with Target was the walk around customer just absolutely vanished because it wasn't pleasant. The let's go to Target is not a thing anymore. There are other places. Let's go to Home Goods. Let's go to TJ Maxx.
What I see visually Walmart doing is investing in their stores, making the inventory much cleaner, more visible online, and making it a pretty seamless experience so that you can get to where you need, get in and out, but at the same time, you're still walking through the store, because if you have kind of something in the shoe section and something in OTC and something in the produce section, that's completely three different sections of the store. But you can, as a consumer, do it pretty efficiently. And the aisles are neat and nice and stocked and et cetera. Now, Target once had that, and it just lost it. And I don't think that it can't get it back. Target used to be that experience 15 years ago. And by the way, Walmart was the mess 15 years ago. So it's, and I don't know how long the Walmart new store design is going to get them. I do think that big box retail is like a hotel. It's like you get so much turn that you have to invest in CapEx every few years because it just gets worn down. Like right now, Walmart's shiny because they've invested in a lot of store makeovers, and they're fresh and pretty now, but in 5 to 10 years, they may not be, or in 15 years, may not be. But to your point, I think that Target stores are just getting a little bit tired, and it is time that they need to, and maybe they already are.
Let's stay on physical retail and talk about Reclect.
It's a great innovative strategy from Urban Outfitters, and that's another retailer that has been creative over the years. It is a mall merchant in the apparel space, not unlike Gap, but there are some differences. There's a lot more of it's a house of brands in many ways, not necessarily household names, but it's not entirely vertically integrated. But yeah, this Reclectic new store is part of the Urban Outfitters family, and it is a combination of resale and overstock, and basically giving everything that they may not have been able to sell in the first place, or in some cases to the resale point, maybe return goods or older goods, trying to give it a second life. So it's really about some of the environmental and just new ways to think about fashion and thrifting and environmental consciousness and sustainability. It's an interesting new idea. There seemed to be a lot of energy. It's a relatively new con. I think it's the store that I saw in Charlotte. There are only a handful, I think 5 or 6 in the entire United States. And Charlotte is one of the markets where they literally just opened like maybe a month ago. It's early days. It's hard to tell. One of the things about any type of an outlet model is that if you're going to scale outlets, kind of people generally like the pricing, but you eventually have to manufacture for the channel. And they're actually not that cheap. Because there's a lot of process flow that's involved in getting the products to the outlet. And there's a lot of labor that goes into that. And unless you're able to streamline that, or you have one massive outlet store and everything goes there, or you have a very few number of stores, then it's a different idea. What's interesting about that particular Reclectic is the one that I'm referring to. It's in a unique location. It's not in outlet mall, but it is like in an older strip center that actually Best Buy also redid a previous full store Best Buy format into a Best Buy outlet store, because there are not a lot of Best Buy outlet stores either. So you have these two kind of outlet models next to each other, but it's also next to a Home Depot and a trampoline park. So it's all over, almost like a new type of shopping center, outlet / shopping center / strip center, neighborhood center, etc.
Very interesting.
There's a grocery store there too, but it's an ethnic grocery store. So very interesting.
Very interesting. We'll see what they do. What I like about them is, like you alluded to, Amazon on a much bigger scale, they're always experimenting, and they're okay to fail. They try things, but they also are in the position, for whatever reason, I'm not sure, because they're publicly traded, so it's not, they do have obligations, but they give themselves a lot of time before they say, that's not working, so forget it, let's move on, as opposed to fail fast, the other side. For example, like a Nuuly got off to a really slow start, but is doing, according to reports, although it's not broken out, and it just analysts reports that it's doing very well. And it took time.
There's no question. I think that they have experimented with a lot of these big trends. I mean, they even had a pizza company that they bought at one point that I think they put like a restaurant on top of one of their stores in Brooklyn. So they've tried a lot of different things, and I give them credit for continuing to experiment in a very difficult retail environment. It's difficult for apparel. It's difficult for high end. It's difficult to be in the consumer facing space these days, not the least of which is there's so much competition and there are environmental concerns and there's macro issues and consumer confidence is down.
It's a very
It's
difficult
tough.
time. I want your comment on the US and live shopping and China and live shopping. It feels like in China, the live shopping and being sold to is bigger there. And here, what Americans prefer is being marketed to and own the purchase piece on their own. They want to be entertained. They take the advertisement as entertainment. And then they go and they buy. But the live selling, the actual transactional piece, hasn't really felt like it resonates with the American customer. That is where I think we see the divide. And maybe that's why we haven't reached this level that everyone predicted during COVID, after COVID, and still predict.
The nuance here is that TikTok and TikTok Shop have exhibited a little bit more promise. And even when we go back to Facebook and kind of Facebook commerce, the success cases were always with small unknown brands that are looking to just reach an audience because they can't get distribution in physical stores or they don't have enough budget. Nobody's going to even know what their site is, but through social, they're able to, that is the aha. It's able to drive more entrepreneurialism through some of these distributed shopping channels. TikTok selling has basically shown that what Americans seem to prefer is not so much the live shopping on the internet, but they would rather just have short asynchronous content. It's short, it's digestible, and it's certain types of products that they don't need to be tried on, or they're not high consideration purchases. And you can have a great influencer making a video and it can sell the good, which I think that Americans have shown that they're open to that. The most interesting thing that I've seen, I don't even know that it's been fully realized, but Nordstrom, I noticed, I don't know how long they've been doing it, but I noticed that their store associates more recently have been putting videos on product detail pages that are vertical videos that essentially show them in very short form. They're short, very snackable content pieces that have these store associates basically selling the product. And I don't know what they're planning to do with it because I didn't see it propagated through Instagram or TikTok or other apps, but I like them. They're a great idea. They're a great supplement. And you could see them pulling this content out and putting it into showing up in somebody's TikTok feed. And I think that could do a lot of really interesting things. They run into inventory issues. That's another thing about TikTok that I think is a lot of what we hear selling are these maybe items where they're pretty deep in inventory, and a lot of apparel may sell out. That's always the issue with any kind of media-based selling in fashion categories is you may attract an audience, but if you don't have the inventory behind it, this is something that direct mail and catalogers have known about for years. And they themselves never have come up with a solution that works for everybody.
Careful what you wish for when you get really a lot of eyeballs and a lot of people wanting it. So is there anything any report or anything that you're creating that you want people to know about?
Great question. I've been covering a lot of retail media, so I'll be publishing more on that in 2025. We are constantly looking at large retail trends, and these days it's what's useful from an automation front. So again, not something that should be a one-way door.
I really want to thank you. We covered a lot, and yet there's so much more we could do. I hope we get to do this another time, maybe later in the year, and do a look back or maybe a recap, because I think we're ready for a wild ride.
Yeah, indeed, for sure. It was so nice to talk, Christine. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. And that's what just happened. I'm Christine Russo.